Hi everyone, my name is Glenda Sparling with SureFit Designs. And in these next two videos, I'm going to be showing you about the asymmetrical body and how we can make our patterns fit our bodies properly. In this video, we'll talk about the asymmetrical shoulder, and in the next video, we'll talk about the asymmetrical waist or hips and waistline. Now, what does asymmetrical mean? Well, it simply means that one side of your body is not the same as the other. In the case of the shoulders, one side is higher, one side is lower. Well, how are you going to know how much besides that visual effect of one side drooping down? What I would recommend that you do is have somebody measure you. And you're standing on like a wood floor. Don't stand on a carpeted floor because that will add some variation here. And then somebody will come along and measure from your low side down to the floor and your high side down to the floor. And let's just take for instance, let's say that you are 60 inches to your shoulder on your high side and only 59 inches on your low side. Well, that's telling you that yes, you do have one shoulder higher than another. But depending on how perfectly your body was standing, the next time there might only be a half an inch of difference. Maybe this shoulder is 59.5 inches high. But the purpose of the measuring is to make sure or help you identify that you actually do have that asymmetry from one side to the other. But what I'd really like you to do when working with your pattern is add an extra bit of seam allowance up at the shoulder line. So let's take a look at the pattern that I've drawn out here. The blue line is the stitching line. That's the line you draw first, and my pencil line here is the seam allowance that I've added. And the seam allowance, of course, in all places is 5/8 of an inch, except for at the shoulder line where I've added a 1-inch seam allowance. And then you want to mark that seam allowance on the fabric so that you know where to stitch and where the original was. So just use your dressmaker's carbon and a tracing wheel and mark it so that when you go to stitch it, you'll see your original stitching line. And then, for the sake of this demonstration, I'm going to be using my friend here, Miss Molly Mannequin. And the mannequin has level shoulders. And so I needed to create some asymmetry for her. So for the side that I said would be high, which is going to be the left side, I just tucked in a little shoulder pad. You can see it there in pink. And we're going to say that the low side is the right side of her body. One other thing that I've done so that you get a really good visual is that I've basted that 1-inch stitching line in white on both the front and the back, so that when we come to do what's called pin fitting, we'll know again where the original stitching line was for the shoulder line. Now this is something that you're not going to be able to do real easily on yourself, so you'll just need to get a sewing buddy to come along behind you and pin that shoulder line down to where your slope is on your shoulder, like this. And you want to get it nice and smooth, and then you're going to take a look at the distance from where the original stitching line was to where the pin is, and that is how much you will actually slope the shoulder on your pattern. Now, your pattern. You do need to draw off a right and a left side. So once you've got the original left side, or in this case, high side done, then you're simply going to trace a copy of that pattern and flop it over, and it's going to be the right side, and in this case, the low side of your body. And then, of course, you will just slope the shoulder the amount that you pinned out in relationship to where the original shoulder line is. Also, the other thing that you will want to check is the distance between your shoulder line to apex and shoulder to waist on both sides of your body, and make sure that if there are differences on your pattern or on your body that you mark those distances on the pattern as well. Then you're going to want to label your pattern very, very clearly. You're going to want to make sure that this says right side face up and left side face up, and you must do a right and a left side pattern. And you do that for the front of your bodice as well as for the back of your bodice. So the other thing that you're going to need to make sure you do is lower the underarm the exact same amount that you lowered the shoulder seam line. And that way you maintain the correct armhole depth for when you set that sleeve in, and then you won't have to make any modifications to the sleeve. Now, one other thing that I'd like to mention to you is when you are doing this slope shoulder adjustment, it's great to do this for when you're wearing a casual blouse or t-shirt or shirt or something like that. But when you go to take your pattern to make a jacket or a coat or a blazer, if you slope the shoulder dramatically, then that blazer is also going to be sloped dramatically. And it's just going to emphasize the fact that your body is not level. And so you might want to consider another alternative, and that is tucking an extra thick shoulder pad in the low side of your body so that when your garment is done, you look more symmetrical. So for this plus other videos on working with the SureFit Designs fitting system, you know what you need to do. Just click on over to the SureFit Designs Learning Center and go to the video library, where you're going to see all kinds of helps and resources for getting you one of the very best fits possible. And always remember that when you use SureFit Designs, you can be sure of the fit.